Will you pray with me? Holy One, let your story lead us to finding our own. Amen. We just heard our beautiful Christmas story, the traditional story with a little different wording that we love to remember at Christmas time. And over the past few weeks, we've been remembering some other stories that we associate with Christmas. Charlie Brown's Christmas and Frosty the Snowman. And today on this foggy day, it wouldn't be right if we didn't talk about Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, right? Now, many of us have heard of Rudolph first by singing it. The song came out in 1949, and I can remember singing it in elementary school. Maybe you all remember your kids or your neighborhood kids or yourselves singing it. That song went straight to the top of the charts in 49, and it's pretty much stayed there as a classic. Then in the 60s, a stop-motion animation came out for TV, back when we had those big old boxy TVs. And I can remember watching that every Christmas season, watching the story of Rudolph. And today, I think if any child anywhere saw a reindeer with a red nose, they would know the name, don't you think? They would know that story just as much as they know this story, the nativity story, because these stories are important to us. Now, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer started out as a little book. And I realized a couple weeks ago I have never read the book. And I found it on NPR, complete with the original sketches, the artist sketches, and the prose written in, and the erasure marks, and a little word missed here and there. It was a joy to read that story. It was written by Robert L. May in 1939 in Chicago. He described himself as a sad man, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. He was writing copy for Montgomery Ward. Now, here's another blast from the past for those of you who are old enough. Do you remember getting the Montgomery Ward Christmas catalog? My brothers and I would fight over it. We would turn the pages and circle everything. It was like the precursor to the internet, to shopping on the web, you know? We could shop in that catalog. Robert May was one of the people that wrote the copy for that catalog, and he also liked to write limericks and fun little poems and, come up with little songs. And so his boss asked him to create a Christmas character for the upcoming Christmas season, because Montgomery Ward had always bought coloring books and given them away to children every holiday season, and they decided, we don't want to spend the money buying somebody else's coloring book, we'll just make our own. So Robert May was asked to create this character. He said he decided right away on a reindeer because his little daughter Barbara was obsessed with the reindeer at Lincoln Park Zoo. And he knew he wanted an R name because he liked a little alliteration. So he tried Reginald and he tried Rollo, and he didn't like anything he came up with. And then he landed on Rudolph, and he said it rolled off the tongue nicely. And then Rudolph got his red nose one cold, wintry day in Chicago. May was looking out the window of his office and saw a heavy fog settle on Lake Michigan. And he wondered, now how is Santa going to get his job done in weather like that? And Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was born. Now, as Rudolph evolved into a story, May finished the story and he shared it with his in-laws and his little daughter, Barbara. Just a test run. He read the whole story to them, and he said he could see in their eyes that the story had accomplished everything he had hoped. That makes me wonder what Luke had hoped for his story about the birth of Jesus. What did Luke want to see in all of our eyes when we heard that story for the very first time? What message did Luke want to share? What was he hoping we would do once we heard this story about Jesus? Now, scholars agree that there are some themes that we can find in Luke's gospel, and one of the easy ones to find is joy. Luke starts with joy. He ends his gospel with joy, and right in the middle, around chapter 15, there are 3 parables about joy. So we can say that's a theme. But scholars also find another theme in Luke, and that's the theme of reversal, reversed expectations. And I find that not just in Luke's gospel, but in this story today and in the entire biblical text. And what I mean by reversal is the first shall be last. If you want to be the greatest of all, you become the servant of all. The proud and powerful will be humble, and the lowly will be lifted. Those are the reversals. But they're hard for us to find in our everyday life because it looks to us like the proud are still proud and the oppressed are still oppressed. And we get lost in that. We can't find any examples. And so Luke gives us in his gospel characters, regular, plain old people like us who experience that kind of reversal. And one of the best examples in our story today is the shepherds. The shepherds are out in the field watching over their flock. Now, there are some Bible translations that suggest a better translation says, the shepherds lived in the field. That implies that the shepherds had no home to go to. And we don't know if that's the case or not, but they slept outside in the elements every night, like some of the folks that we see here in our community. Now, the other thing about shepherds is that they are the lowliest of the low. It is the worst job. No one wants it. And so often it's very young people that end up with those jobs. So these sheep, they're probably not even owned by these shepherds. The shepherds are probably hired hands, but if they are, if these sheep belong to the family, these shepherds are 12. They're 14 years old. They're kids, and they're sleeping outside, and they're looking up at the sky when a great reversal happens. Because the angels come to them. The angels don't go to the palace or to the government or to the good people in the temple praying or to the people you would expect, the powerful, the wealthy, the ones who can make a difference. The angels come to the lowliest of the lowly and invite them to come and find the Christ. Come and see the good news for all people. And the shepherds say yes. They go. Now, I've always thought there must have been at least one shepherd who's laying there looking up at the sky and sees all the angels and says, whoa, did we eat mushrooms today? But that's not in the story, right? So we assume that everybody went, yes, this is something important and we're going to go. So they go to find the Christ child, and then they spread the word everywhere. Their story changes with one invitation, one heavenly invitation to go seek Christ. And their story, I don't think, would ever be the same. But we know it started out not that great, living in a field, taking care of a bunch of sheep. Robert May's story did not start out great either. He described himself as a small, timid child who knew what it felt like to be the underdog, who was not invited to play in any reindeer games, who felt often sad and lonesome. And his family had lost all of their money and their family business in the Great Depression. So he had gone from having some stability to having none. And now, instead of writing the next great American novel, Robert May was writing copy about men's white shirts for a mail order catalog. And his wife was dying. Robert May's wife, young as she was, he was only 35, was dying from an illness, a long illness. And before he finished the story of Rudolph, his wife died. His boss offered to take Rudolph off his plate, trying to give him some relief in his grief. But Robert May said no. He said, I need Rudolph now more than ever. And so he finished the story. Montgomery Ward put a little book together. They gave it to over 2 million children, and they called it a success. But Robert May's story didn't change at all. In fact, it got a little worse. He was deep in debt with medical bills. He was still writing copy for a catalog, and now he was a single parent too. And then, in a great reversal, the CEO of Montgomery Ward gave the rights to Rudolph to Robert May. He suddenly owned his own story. It belonged to him. He could decide what the next page for Rudolph would be. He had the book published. Took a while, but he got it done. And then he asked his brother-in-law, Johnny Marks, to write a little song. And now we all know the rest of the story, don't we? Robert May's life completely changed because of a reversal where the proud and the powerful were humble and the lowly were lifted up. That reversal is what this story is inviting us to think about. What do you need to have reversed in your life? What is your story? What is the story you say to yourself each and every day? Do you have a page in your story on bullying? Maybe you were bullied. Maybe you have a page of heartbreak, a page of grief. Maybe you have a page where you felt different and you were excluded. I hope you have many, many pages of joy and gratitude and hope and falling in love and all of those good things. But you know, the hard times are so hard that when we encounter enough of those, sometimes we can't switch our emotions. And we start to marinate in those hard feelings and the pain. And pretty soon, our story starts to get written all by itself. Every time we turn a page, the page is already written for us. It's going to be more pain. This relationship is never going to heal. I'm never going to feel better. I'm never going to. Now, I'm not minimizing our pain today. I've had some trauma myself, so I know what it feels like. But we have to be so careful. What is the story we're telling ourselves? Because this story of the birth of the Christ child invites us to turn a page so that we have before us a clean, blank piece of paper ready for us to write on it. We can either sit back and let it write itself with the same old story, or today we can choose a new story, a new word, a new sentence, a new hope. This story invites us to reverse, to write a new story. And so now this blank paper is in front of you. What will you write?